Hello again, I'm Professor Reboot, and in this video I'm going to show you how to create your bibliographical references page in APA 7th formatting style. Now before you see a pre-populated APA 7th edition paper that we created during the video for in-text citation demonstration and the basic structure of an APA 7th paper. Please note that you have a title page. All pages are double-spaced in APA. You need to use a professional font. Your title on the title page needs to be in title case. And as a student, you do not need an abstract. There are distinctions between student APA 7th and professional APA 7th. So if you are a professional who plans to be publishing in a peer-reviewed journal using APA 7th edition style, it is important that you consult an alternative resource guide to help you set up your paper. This is strictly for students using APA 7th. Now this paper includes in-text citations, and an in-text citation in APA formatting style includes the author, the institutional author, on some occasions the title of the article, the date or dates it was published. For instance, in this case, there is an original date of publication followed by a translated date of publication, and the page or paragraph number if it is a text-based resource where you obtained that information. Once you have established that as the foundation of your paper, and you ensure that every place in your paper has an in-text citation for any claims you make, you are now ready to create your bibliographical page. Now, bibliographies are different depending on the type of source you have, so it is critical that you know what type of source you are citing, and then use the citation style guide available to you in whatever edition is the most recent, following whatever guidelines your professor, the institution, or the publisher are giving you that may supersede or override the APA 7th guidelines by adding details to the basic overall structure. For instance, if you're taking one of my classes, I do require you to include a URL or a DOI for every digital reference you make, even if the APA citation style guide tells you that you do not need to use a URL for that citation. Now, the first thing we need to know about our references page is that it is a page unto itself. So the paper ends here, insert a page break, and then begin your references page at the top of a new page. The very first entry should be the first entry in alphabetical order of your in-text citations list. In-text citations generally lead your reader to the full bibliographical citation in the references page. Now, I've already started with Aristotle. We know that an in-text citation always includes a parenthetical remark. It's either parentheses for the date or it's parentheses for the page or paragraph number at the end. But there's always an open parenthesis in whatever it is that you are citing. Now, it is true that occasionally you might use parentheses in the creation of your paper. Now, it is true that you might use parentheses in the actual writing of your paper, but that should not be so significant that it distracts you from the process I'm about to show you. Now, right now, we're going to collect the first part of all of the in-text citations that appear in this paper, and I'm going to do that by using the Find feature. Now, on a PC, that is Control F. On a Mac or other devices, it might be Command plus F or the Apple key plus F or Apple command plus F. And then we're going to look open parentheses key. Now there are 12 of 13 results in this paper. It's actually showing me the first that I already have here. So let's just toggle through and find the first one. This one here is an example of parenthetical remark that is actually in the paper I wrote. It's not a citation. Let's find the next one. Here we have the Aristotle reference. Now Aristotle I already have on my paper, so I can move on to the next one. We have Clark, 1873. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that. And I will need the first initial. So in this case, I know Clark is from this resource, so his first initial is S, and he has a middle initial, so I need both of those. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the end now. Go ahead and place Clark's last name in, removing that parenthetical, and I put his first initials, open parentheses for the date of publication, close parentheses to get that citation started. Now let's find the next one. So after Clark, we have the National Oceanic Atmospheric Association, which, as you recall, was an institutional author. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that, jump to the end, place it where it belongs alphabetically. Notice how I'm putting a period after the author's name or the institutional author's name, and I am encasing the date in parentheses with a comma between year and month if month happens to be a part of that. That is how you generally structure your citation style in APA. And also notice that I am already populating it in alphabetical order, ACN. So let's find the next one. We have Hansen et al. Now in APA 7th edition, you are required to depart from APA 6th edition guidelines, where in APA 6th, if you had 6 authors or more in a resource, you were required to just cite the first 6 and truncate your full bibliographical citation. Well, in APA 7th, the more recent edition, you are now required to list up to the first 20 full authors of a document. Now, if you watched my in-text paper, you know that this particular resource has several authors. But let's just get started with Hansen, and let's find the full article. So Hansen, James E., and then I have 18 authors, just enough for me to have to list all of them. But just to get myself started, I'm going to remind myself who this person is, and then a comma for the next person, and the date it was published in parentheses. And I will remember to go back and add the rest of the authors when I finish my citation. For now, I'm just making sure I have every in-text citation that I need to cite bibliographically listed so that I can get started on constructing those bibliographies. Now, lastly, I want to draw your attention to just one detail. Now, this last piece of information came from a course lecture that was delivered live and in person, which means there is no recording of it and therefore no URL. This live lecture would be what we call in APA personal communication. Personal communication includes interviews you conduct with experts, phone calls, live conversations you have with experts, anytime you talk to an expert, or if you conduct correspondence like email or texting with an expert. So personal communication in APA 7th edition does not get referenced in your bibliography. It remains solely in your in-text citation, and it is indicated by actually using the words personal communication. Now that we have the opening for each of our citations, it's time to determine what type of source we are citing. Now, the first source for Aristotle came from Project Gutenberg. Project Gutenberg is an open source repository of public domain resources. Now, Aristotle lived a long time ago and wrote in ancient Greek. You'll notice that this book, though, is written in English, which means someone somewhere translated this book. So I'm going to need some information in order to finish this citation. Let's look at how you cite an online book that has an original publication date that was written in one language and translated into another, using APA 7th. So I'm using the online writing lab at Purdue University and their APA 7th citation style guide to locate how to cite a book that is translated. And this is the format that I will be using for my Aristotle work. Notice that it does use a hanging indentation. I will show you how to do that, but for now I'm going to copy this structure and bring that over to our paper. Now that I'm in the paper, I just want to make sure I follow that structure, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in here with the hanging indentation guide. Now notice that I am using the author Aristotle and not the translator, but I am using the year that it was published by the translator. Next, I will put a period after the year of publication, and it's time to title the work. Notice the capitalization of this title. When you title works in APA, you use sentence case. You only capitalize proper nouns or the words that appear after a colon in a title. You also do not encase any titles in quotation marks. So let's see how that's done. There, now I have created the author, year published, the title. In this case, Nicomachean would be a proper noun. I should have ethics lowercase because this is sentence case. Aristotle is, of course, a proper noun. I have the names of both translators from Project Gutenberg. Project Gutenberg, in this case, is the publisher, with the original work being published around 350 BCE. And because the URL took up so much space, I did move it onto its own line. It is possible to split a URL in APA format. You would split it at one of the forward slashes or a hyphen, but it was just easier to go ahead and move that in this case. So we've done now our first citation. I'm going to remove the guide for that, and let's get started on the next one. Once again, we return to the online writing lab at Purdue's APA 7th Citation Style Guide, where on this side I can find a short list of where I need to search for the type of citation style I'm looking for. Now, we're looking at a reference list for books, and this is a fairly basic book, though it is an ebook. So I'm going to go ahead and follow this basic book format. And notice DOI. DOI does refer to also a document's reference number, but also a URL. So in this case, I do have a URL for this book. Let's transfer this over to our paper. Now we just need to copy the same format that we see here for Clark S.W.'s resource. Let's do that now. And now we have cited our book. Notice how, again, we've used sentence case, and I actually don't believe this is part of the title, so I'm going to take that out. Go ahead and move the URL to its own line. And there we go. Now this next resource is a little bit trickier. It has fewer than 20 authors, and it's a peer-reviewed article. So I want to draw your attention first to the basic rules of formatting in APA 7th edition style. Notice here we have the rule that says if there are 20 authors, you would list all of those authors in the body of your bibliographical citation without truncation. If you have 21 or more, then you would conduct a method of truncation for your, which means reduction, for your bibliographical citation. So that is the first rule we need to address here. Now we're going to look over here in the references list for how we would cite articles and periodicals. It might also be in electronic sources, but I'm going to try here first because I know it's a peer-reviewed article. And this actually does represent fairly close to the type of article that I'm citing. It has your volume and your issue number, your page range. So let's go ahead and mimic this style here. Because this one is a little different than the other APA guides we've had where it just listed the type of source, I've gone ahead and highlighted the source structure so that we can differentiate the real source from the example we are using to create the source. Now let's get started. We have 18 authors to list, so that is going to take some time. Let's find all their names. Now each author's name will be separated by a comma. And for the last author, I make sure to put an ampersand and close out the citation with a period to close the first initial of the final author and a period after the enclosed parenthetical date of the publication. Now that's just the beginning. Now I've gone ahead and added the title again in sentence case. Let's go ahead and look at a little trick for getting the rest of the information we need for the citation of this article. Now, in some places when you find a peer-reviewed or scholarly resource, you will see an option to cite this article. Do not follow that suggestion because it may not be the most accurate. Whoever presented this article online may have put it in APA 5th or 6th edition style, and because of that, you may not be correctly citing it if you follow this format. For instance, look at this. They actually are capitalizing all of the letters in the title, and that's what we just learned is not how APA 7th handles the titling of full-length works. However, I am noticing that it does come from a journal, so my use of the italicization of the title needs to be inverted. So let me grab that. Notice how I'm not grabbing the DOI, and I'm going to tell you why in a moment. And I'm going to place this here. Unitalicize the article. Now the article meaning a shorter work, so it does not get italicized, but the journal it appears in is a longer work and it does get italicized. The volume number is 67, that gets italicized, whereas the issue number next to it in parentheses does not. And you don't need to list words like volume or issue. APA's citation style tells you that. Finally, the page range that this appears in the article is listed next, so that if I am referencing page numbers, that should align with the page numbers from the article. Now remember, I got this from a PDF source, and I could list the DOI for my link. However, because I consulted a PDF, I'm actually going to make sure that my readers can get to that exact resource and put the PDF I consulted here. So now remember, I've got to do that hanging indentation. So I find the second line of my citation, hit enter, and then rinse, lather, repeat. And here's a great example of a URL being beneficially broken. So I'm going to go ahead and break this link, hit enter after the slash there, and enter here. And then I'm going to grab the full URL once more. And just to make this easier on my instructor or whoever's reviewing, I'm going to insert this as hypertext in both places. Because I broke the link, that hypertext will not get the reader where it needs to go. So instead, I'm going to highlight the text in both places where it's broken and tell the computer by inserting link to actually look at the whole link, whether the instructor or person reading it clicks on the top part or the bottom part. And there we go. Next, we will look at how to properly bibliographically cite a website that has an organizational or institutional author. Here you see on the OWL at Purdue website, webpage or piece of online content that is created by a group. Here is the structure for how we would cite that source. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and transfer that as the template for how we create the citation for our NOAA reference. Once again, the citation structure template uses actual reference material, so I'm going to use this to deconstruct and create that same citation style for our NOAA reference. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, and next up we have the date, which is correct, then a As you can see, that last one was fairly simple to produce. Hopefully you're beginning to see that there is a certain logic to how these sources are structured. So let's jump into how we would cite a YouTube video. Once again, I'm using the online writing lab at Purdue University, and I am using it to find how to cite a video on YouTube. They have a specific category for that, and here is the structure. So let me go ahead and grab that structure and transfer that over to our paper. So once again, the template is highlighted, and as you can see, I've already got the person or group that uploaded the video. The punctuation is appropriate. The date that it was published is up, although I probably need the specific day, and we were using, I believe, this video here. Let's grab the title while we're here, and it was 4 days ago, so that would be the 19th of July. Period after the date. So Word will try to embed the video as though I was embedding it in a website. So that's why I had to alter it to just be hypertext. I also decided to split the link so that it would carry over onto 2 lines. And then I made it hypertext so that no matter where the person clicks, they will get the full URL if they were to click on it. Once again, we're using the online writing lab at Purdue's APA 7th Style Guide to find the template for how to cite 2 or more works by the same author in the same year. As you can see, the template does use something similar to what we used in our in-text citation by assigning a lowercase letter after the date of publication for each of those references. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and transfer that to our paper as a template. So the most important part of distinguishing these 2 sources published in the same year by the same author has already been established by using the lowercase a and lowercase b to distinguish which is which. And I also use that in the in-text citation, which you can see in the in-text video. Now we'll follow the template for the rest of this. As you can see, this lists under the assumption that there will be an article title and then perhaps the title of a larger body of work, like a journal in which it was published, possibly a volume and issue number, possibly a page range. Now our source happens to be a website. Now our first website is this here, The Future of Artificial Intelligence, AI, What You Need to Know. And remember, I put that in title case with the exception of any proper nouns and the first word that comes after a colon. So let's see how that looks. Now note that that did come from a larger body of work. Robert F. Smith apparently hosts his own blog under the name Robert F. Smith. So even though we've already said his name as the author, he's also, or at least Robert F. Smith, is also the name of the host of the channel. So we also need to put that in as our proper title for the website host. And then finally, we need a URL. Anything digital has a URL. Put in our hanging indentation, and then let's repeat that for our second source. Now that I've completed that, I can remove the template. And here we have our completed reference page for the paper we constructed together in the in-text citation video. There is now a reference for everything that requires a bibliographical reference. Remember, personal communication, which is the last thing we cited in the paper, does not get included in your bibliography in APA 7th formatting style. Now this should be enough to get you started, but just a reminder, as with any citation style, it is a good idea to get yourself a copy of the most recent edition of the Manual of Style Guide. There are free versions on the web, such as apastyle.org or the online writing lab at Purdue, which we used today. But there are also actual manuals you can purchase, and if you find that you will be needing to consult a manual with any frequency, I do recommend that you get yourself a copy of something so that you have a way to flip through that style guide and answer any questions that may come up. For instance, we had 18 authors on this source here. What if we had had 27? How would that have looked? What if we had had 88? What if we had had just 3? At what point do we change that structure? Questions like that are answered in the style guide. So thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned for future videos. Please like and subscribe. Have a nice day.